February the 14th, Valentine's Day, with Mr. Harold Barton as part of the Veterans Project for the World War II history recordings of individual life stories. Mr. Barton was born in eastern Kentucky in 1921, entered the military in 1940, had a glorious career in World War II and in the Air Force thereafter, and then retired to the Atlanta area. And he's going to talk to us about what it was like to grow up during the Depression times, where he was on Pearl Harbor Day, and what happened to him in the military and what has happened to him since then. We're just delighted to have you with us today, Mr. Barton.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I hope that I can say a few words regarding my background and military career, and also my escapade, if you will call it that, in bailing out in Burma, in northern Burma, and walking through the Japanese lines to the American lines. Actually, there was no lines. You couldn't, debarkation, you couldn't tell from one start from one to the other. And then we flew out of the place, out of Burma into India, where my home station was. And to backtrack a little bit, to go, I had a twin brother. We got into the military service in 1940, I believe, August 2, 1940. And twin brother, and we were on the most significant part that I can remember was December the 7th. We were in a Muscogee, Oklahoma theater watching a Western. And the only way that they could give a message to the audience is write it on a piece of paper and stick it in front of the camera. And you'd have to read what was on the piece of paper, because they didn't have slides like they do nowadays. And so that slide come across the screen says Pearl Harbor attacked. And 99 hundreds out of 100 people didn't know Pearl Harbor or where Pearl Harbor was, including me as much. We ended up all the other people in Oklahoma. So we told we didn't do anything ourselves, but there's so much noise raised that the sheet of paper was withdrawn, and we got to show the movie again. Then about another minute, had another sheet of paper that was slid across the front of the screen that said the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. We said, where in the world is Pearl Harbor? Didn't know where Pearl Harbor was. And finally we started talking about Pearl Harbor in about 15 minutes. Well, anyway, the movie was done away with, and it was shut off, and we all went back to we was in a civilian flying school, by the way, in basic training to be a pilot. And we'd been in, I see that was in May 1941, because I graduated 20th of May 1942. That was after August 1941, so I'd been in the service about a year with my twin brother. Then we graduated from that, from the Air Force Flying School in May 1942, and he went his way and I went my way, and I have no idea where he went after that, because I didn't keep track of him. I was so busy and dumb letting the world get a hold of me that I tried to learn everything I could. And anyway, I first went to North Africa, and I knew that the Germans had pushed all the way across Egypt and was pushing westbound in North Africa. But that's about all I knew about it. And then I was sent to North Africa just by virtue of graduating from flying school. And I got a lot of experience in the first 6 months that I graduated from flying school in the United States, because I flew to most of the states in the Union, all of the southern states. I went into them for some reason or other to get fuel or something. And I was stationed at Delhart, Texas, and Wichita, Kansas, and Los Angeles, and Minesfield in Los Angeles. By the way, that airport was so camouflaged that when you flew into it, you couldn't hardly tell where the runway started and the houses started. They had houses painted on the runway, and you could look at it from the pilot's viewpoint as you stretch your out, looked at, and you see houses, and pretty soon you see where the runway started, because it was a debarkation line. where the concrete started. So that was the airfield we went into
What were you flying then?
in a C-47.
So you were trained in,
I was flying in a basic trainer, PT-13 and a PT-19, and then a BT-13 in basic and a AT-6 and a BC-1 in advanced. They were all single engine airplanes, and the one is just a little faster, and the last one I mentioned, the BC-1 and AT-6 had a retractable landing gear. But the BT-13 was a fixed airplane built by Vultee out of Nashville, Tennessee. I didn't know that till later. And then graduated at flying in school in 1942, May the 20th, 1942. And then you really don't start logging your flying time as a pilot until after that date, the date you graduated. And then I guess I must have gone, I can't remember the days exactly, but I went to North Africa with a new C-47 early in 1943. Because I remember Christmas of 1942, I was stationed in Delhart, Texas. And it was approaching Christmas. And shortly thereafter, I was in Africa, in North Africa. Now in North Africa, we flew along the coast of South America and across the Central Atlantic to Ascension Islands, then up the west coast of Africa, from the Horn to Dakar and up the west coast of Africa. And we had to fly out in the water maybe 20 or 30 miles for several countries because we weren't allowed to land in them or fly over them. Our country, the United States, hadn't got permission to do that. Now this was in early 1943. Then we flew missions with the Air Force, with the Army Air Corps. The Air Force didn't exist. And I will use those terms interchangeably, but I want people to understand that there wasn't any Air Force until 1947, until the Air Force got its own designation. It was the Army Air Corps. And I went to North Africa and flew for Oran as a country, and to Algiers as a country, and Ethiopia as a country in North Africa. And I'm not sure exactly where those countries started, the borders. I can't place them. They were all together. We just flew over them. And I was stationed at Algiers, the last place that I got a teletype. We had crew numbers, and the crew number was, mine was, we'll call it 1, 2, 3, 4, but that wasn't it. And they said the crew numbers will report to Memphis, Tennessee to pick up an airplane to take it to India. That's all it said. And I can't remember the words exactly. Anyway, we got our crew together, the same crew that had flown to North Africa together after we had flown several missions against the Germans, by then they had them on the run, pushing them back into Egypt, and then they pushed them back to the Red Sea. Then they was going to go into Italy and then go up through Italy, if you remember that part of the war. Well, anyway, to make a long story short, I had got my orders to come back to the United States, go to Memphis, Tennessee, pick up a new C-47, but I didn't pick it up until I got to Mobile, Alabama. I just got the orders, went to Mobile, Alabama, picked up a new airplane, and went to India, the same way, across the northern coast of South America, Ascension Islands, Dakar, Africa, that's where the Horn comes out in Africa, and then we went across Central Africa to Muscogee and Khartoum, Egypt. Khartoum and Egypt were countries then that extended way south. Egypt extended way from the northern Mediterranean Sea all the way down in Africa. We went to the coast of Arabia and flew down the Red Sea, Aden. And that's where I got to scare my life. The radio operator had a ferry pistol, and it was about this far, about 12 inches from your head. And the radio operator answered the person on the ground that had sent the flare up to challenge us that we were flying over a non-restricted area. And I didn't know he had fired it, and I thought we were shot. Well, it was, my heart was in my mouth for a second, then I found out that he had just responded to the flare pistol had been shot off the ground. He had just responded to them. And we had different ones, different flares that we'd find, one with one ball and 2 balls and 3 balls, and then one with 1 ball and a long blast. It would just be a streak of fire. It would shoot out. But you could read the code on the ground. Well, to make a long story short, we flew up Arabian coast to Karachi, India, which is now called Pakistan. But it was Karachi, India then. Then from Karachi, India, went to Gaya, India, and several other towns in Italy. And then we went to our base up in India called, the one I bailed out of, Chabwa. Went to Chabwa, India. That's not it. That's right here, right there. And then went to Chabwa, India. Then that's when I started flying from India to China, almost every day, back and forth.
What were you taking over as cargo? And
We was taking 50-gallon drums of fuel, and we put, and if we cut down, I believe we put 7 drums of fuel, we could take 500-pound bombs on top of the barrels. They just laid them on top of the barrels. They would. You're laughing, but it's funny. But they weren't fused. The fuse we had in a different box. They had the fuse that goes in the bomb. The bomb is all ready to explode.
I feel much better.
Yeah.
I was worried about
But the fuse wasn't in the bomb itself.
Okay.
We had it in another box. But the ones we hauled were laid on top of the drums. Now, when I was in India, I flew a C-46, a C-87. A C-87 is B-24 with the belly welded up, metal strips put on and riveted up, and the 50-gallon drums were set right down the middle of the B-24, and then the 500-pound bombs were laid on top of them. And they were, I believe they were tied down with a rope. I'm not sure. But sometimes they were tied down, sometimes they weren't. And then the C-46 was a good airplane, and then it was a good airplane, but the pilots and the crews weren't checked out on it. The hydraulic system would get hot, overheat, unless it was put on recirculate.
No.
And that really doesn't mean much to you, doesn't mean anything to me at the time, but it does now. But the hydraulic system would get hot, and I think that the B-24 and the C-46, the innovation of getting those airplanes that were helped out to get supplies to China, but they didn't give the crews enough time. And seeing at B-24, I got 1 hour's transition, and that was sitting in the back end of the airplane, waiting for my turn to come up, shoot a landing. I shot one landing, we had a flat tire. And then the next morning I was in a B-24, I was the pilot, mind you, going to China. And I got in the C-46, I flew the C-46 the same way. And our runways in India were built in T-paddies. And it was level ground, and the railroad come about 2 wingspans, say about 200 feet, I'm guessing. Over to the right-hand side of the runway would be a railroad. That was where the gasoline and the bombs and the freight that you would take over and put on the airplane and be taken off of the train, off the flat cars, and take it and put it right on the plane, just one right after another. So they'd empty a train, and we used up airplanes that was in Chabwa, India, about 60 miles southeast of Chabwa, India. Was at Jorhat, and we was about 60 miles southeast of Chabwa. And there's another base that I helped started and open it. And we had opened it with C-47s, and then changed the C-46s, and changed the C-87. In September 1943, we had 32, I believe, 32 C-87s, B-24s, converted on the base at the first of the month, and the last day of the month we didn't have any. And the one that was saved was on the ground that you had, well, we'd lost all the rest of them. We got replacement airplanes and replacement crews for all.
Enemy fire or?
No, most of them were lost. The airplane that just never returned, and the crew wouldn't return. So you didn't know what happened to them. And the intelligence, that was bad. I'd say it wasn't good in that a crew wouldn't come back that night. First crew, we were all familiar with the fire. I remember when the first crew went down, we went to the basic, our wing commander, and tried to get him to let us go look for him. And he says, it's no use, it's no use. And finally, he let several airplanes go over into Burma and look for him, fly up and down the valleys and look for him. That's the only airplane I ever remember we looked for. We found out his fuel. He knew that, but he got it off his chest by letting us go over there. Us, it's about 15 or 20 of us got different airplanes, and we flew over to Burma and to the first ridge of mountains, and we felt that's where he went down. He could have gone down any place. But anyway, that make a long story short, they lost so many each day that they didn't pay any attention to anybody being lost.
That's great.
I mean, it's not that you didn't care, the military didn't care or didn't want to do something about it, but it was futile for you to send somebody out there. You just burn up gasoline.
What was the height of the mountain ridge that you were
I
flying?
guess the original ones, the first hills you'd come to is about 7,000 or 8,000 feet, and then they rose up steadily. I think about 12,000 feet was the second ridge, and at Mount Tally was 19,100 feet or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'll get to that just a little bit on the airplane when I build out. Pass by that. But Kunming, UNE was about 110 miles, I can't remember, but 110 miles from Kunming, China. Kunming, China is where we delivered most of our stuff. But we delivered to riverbeds. Qingtu is another place, and I can't even pronounce 2 or 3 of the places we went into. That the P-40s, the Flying Tigers, flew out of those fields, and that's the reason we had to get the bumps and the gasoline to them. And we landed in riverbeds that didn't even have a name to unload gasoline to get a P-40 out. Then it landed in a riverbed. He run out of gas, and he couldn't get home. Or he was sitting there. He was in one piece, and we'd haul enough gas in there to fill him up, let him take off. So that was a part of World War II that most pilots was not used to, and this, I'll excuse the expression, the sloppy attitude that you did. Like you fly into a riverbed, you wouldn't go into an unmarked airfield for loving their money, otherwise. Over there, we'd fly into a riverbed, and if he had landed in there, I'll take the gas in there and get him out. Wouldn't load up with bombs or anything, so it wouldn't be light. So it wouldn't be heavy, it would be light.
Would you be in ground communication with the pilot on the riverbed?
Well, there wasn't any communications in that when we landed in the riverbed.
You would spot him and realize he was there?
Realize, somebody would tell us he was there. Some people on the ground would tell us that he had landed there in a certain riverbed. We'd get gasoline and take drums in and fill him up so he could get out.
You must have lost some planes when the riverbed wasn't as smooth as it was supposed to be.
I'm sure they did lose some, but I don't remember of them losing any. There could have been some. But it was like the war had to be fought and it had to be won. And you couldn't leave that good airplane sitting there. You had to do something to get him out.
Yeah.
And to make a long story short, I'd like to get back, to my last trip. I flew 90 trips out of 4 bases. I helped start Muscogee, India, and that's a huge river that runs east and west called the Brahmaputra River, and we'll get to it in here. And I'm hitting the highlights when I get to my story about building out. So on the 16th day of February, I had gone to, I'd flown, moved from Muscogee to Chebwa, and I was in a weather squadron. We flew every 4 hours. We flew weather ship, and report, we'd fly a zigzag course over and a zigzag course back like a saw, great big zigzag course, and report the weather every 30 minutes. Report what you see, not the flying, or the person flying would be concerned with. So on February the 16th, I had gone to China and gone to Kunming, by the way, and I was in a C-46, and it was, we'd taken off somewhere around 4 o'clock in the afternoon over in India, and we'd gone to China, and it was about 11:30 in the evening on the 16th of February, and my crew was made up at that time of myself, H.H. Barton, the co-pilot was Second Lieutenant R.R. Bagsby, radio operator was Corporal G.L. Hammond, and the crew chief was Private C. Linthicum, Linthicum, and those were the crews, and I had flown with the radio operator Hammond before, but I've never flown with the other two people at all. I'd never been on the airplane with them. So you got a different crew almost, not every time you went, but many times that you went, you got a different crew. You didn't fly with the same people. So you didn't know them or you did know them. And we went over about 17,000 feet. One thing, it was, you didn't want to hit the hills and the mountains, and it would clear all of them, but the one mountain, at Mount Tally that I mentioned a while ago, at 19,000 feet, 19,100 feet, but it didn't cover a lot of real estate, so you didn't worry about it too much. Chances of missing it were just as good or better than the chances of hitting it. But anyway, we went over to Kunming, got rid of our load, and come back, and we had, as our load coming back, we had one used Allison engine as a P-40 engine. It probably was coming back for overhaul, I know, that's all we had to come back. Probably weighed 2,000 pounds, I'm guessing it weighed, I don't know. And we would, I'm going to tell you this story, tell you the truth, how a bearing is taken, so that you can find out where you are, the person on the ground. The person on the ground will wear a headset, and he has an antenna on top of his head, a round antenna, I think it's round. And he turns like this real slow, right and left, right and left. And then he turns real slow and he gets nothing when he's facing you. When the antenna's like this, and I'm making a circle with my hands in front of my face. And when that is pointed toward the plane, that means that he's either going in that direction or he's going in this direction. And to make sure he's going, they had a pattern that you'd fly. And the person that was doing this on the ground, with his turning his head right and left, doing his ground, he would get a bearing on you, and he'd have you to fly a pattern, 2 minutes this way, 2 minutes that way, and 2 minutes this way, and he's supposed to give you a heading. And it verifies this in this writing right here, that I questioned when we were heading back to China, back to India that night, that they had given us the wrong bearing, and that the bearing was incorrect, and we was flying, and they told us we are flying about 300 degrees, and they told us to fly 130, I believe it was, 130, 35, that's 180 degrees. That means that you went over to the place and you turned around and you're going right back over it again.
Yeah.
And they told us to fly 130 degrees. And so we questioned that. And all the time that we were going back and forth, asking the people that to take another bearing on us, and the communications was bad. And it's not the people on the ground's fault, it's the equipment that was available to you at the time. It was bad. Sometimes you'd have to ask them to repeat 2 or 3 times. Anyway, the last heading they give us, we knew that we had flown in the wrong direction for about an hour, and we weren't going to have enough gas to get back. And we told them that wasn't gonna have enough gas to get back when he told us to turn around and fly 320 degrees back to China, back to India. That's our destination, China, India. And we had told them that they gave us the wrong heading, and that we'd have to change our heading and fly the 320 degrees back. We told them then we run out of gas, was going to run out of gas, and that that wasn't any alternative. And we got the parachutes on, and I think it was 18 or 19,000 feet, say 19,000 feet. We didn't need to be that high because the hills weren't that high. And we had winter jackets, and we got everybody put on the winter jacket, and all the winter clothes he could get on, and they put his parachute on it. And that made the parachute a little bit tight fitted, but that didn't make any difference. You're gonna have to use it or not use it. And the alternative was a lot better to use it and see if it'd work. And we didn't think that part of it. I'm saying that out loud, but we didn't think about that. Our destination was to bail out, and we'd have to. And then we knew we was over Burma, or we thought we was over Burma, northern Burma. And the last information we got from the people on the ground that we were 68 miles southeast of China, India. That's the place where we left from. And I was, oh, that's not far to walk. You know, you big boy then, that's not far to walk. I'm 23 years old, alone in the world. And you don't know from your elbow, but you think you do. And then we bailed out, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I was the last person to bail out, and the radio operator was the first man back there to bail out, but he wasn't the first one to go out. I think the co-pilot went out first, and then the engineer went out, Linthicum, and then the radio operator bailed out third, and then both engines had quit because I had flown the airplane and to stand up between the middle of the seats. It's easy to fly once you get it trimmed, with one engine shut down. And when the good engine quit running, that meant we had no petrol. So we had to leave the thing in a hurry because pretty soon they start down. So I went back and bailed out, and I pushed, I think, it's been such a long time, but I believe I pushed the radio operator out. And his parachute opened up immediately. He yanked on the ripcord, and he got it open in a hurry. And then I bailed out fourth, and the reason I showed you this piece of paper, the yellow piece of paper, it shows how close we were to the Japanese and didn't know we were close to the Japanese. We were behind the Japanese line then and didn't know it. Make a long story short, we bailed out, we got sick, we skinned our legs from our knees to our shins when we went down through the limbs. And you're told when you bail out in the dark and you can't see, stay where you are in the trees until daylight, till you can see how far off the ground you are, till you take precautions, and you know what kind of precautions you have to take to protect yourself.
Sure.
And then the jungle pack on the chute is behind you, and the zip, it's got 2 zippers, and I'm going through the motion now, showing you how the zippers come across the back. Start at the bottom. I'll get up and show you. The zipper on the parachute is like this, but if you open it up, everything in it will fall out. So I closed, something fell out of mine, and I wasn't near the other people, so I couldn't make that kind of a racket to them to tell them to know it, because they're grown boys, they could do the best they could. And then we I bailed out, I think I bailed out at about 2:30 in the morning, 2:30 in the morning, and I hung in the trees. The straps on them, I'm sure the other people got sick too, but make you sick when you crushed in your groin,
Yeah.
and the straps crushed. Well, I didn't feel too good, and I'm sure they didn't either. And then I found out that I was about 20 feet off the ground when daylight came, and it was bamboo underneath me. I hung there for what seemed like hours, and I'm certain that it wasn't very long, because your mind stretches when you think about how long you're doing something, and you really aren't doing it that long. It's about half that long, or that's all. Anyway, I cut the shroud lines, and I had a pocket knife. I always carry a pocket knife, and I zipped my jungle pack open when I found out everything was going to fall out of it if I unzipped it. And I took, I don't know how I got to my knife, and I cut the shroud lines, cut them off, and I think I closed my eyes, I'm not sure, and crossed my legs before all this happened. I crossed my legs, so it went down through the bamboo, and I made an awful sound. And I said, well, if I'm close to the enemy, I don't want them to hear me, but if I'm close to somebody else in my crew, I want them to hear me. So I didn't know what to do, and then about, it wasn't 30 seconds, I guess, or very short while, another crashing sound went down. And I said, oh, that's a crew member. It has to be, we went down together. And the crew member went down, and it turned out that I had got I had a 45 gun, and I had, it was loaded. So I shot one or two times, one time I guess, I'm not sure. But I wasn't thinking about being behind the enemy's lines. I was thinking about being in friendly territory. And so that didn't enter my mind, being behind the enemy lines. And then I heard a shot from the other guy. And then I hollered at him. And I found out that he was below me some few feet. I couldn't see where he was, it's so thick. And I said, I will sit still. I'll stay still, and I'll keep making a noise until you get to me. And he made his way to me. And his name was Hammond, and he was a radio operator. Now, he was a young fella. He was probably, I was old man of the crew. I was 23. I believe he was 19. And he was healthy, and he was a long drink of water, and he did a lot of things good, and both of us did a lot of things good and a lot of things bad by helping each other. And from that day on, we met lots of people. We went to make a long story short, we went through we happened to run into 7 people. We had built a fire the night before, and I took off my shoes. I don't know whether Hammond took his off or not, but my feet swelled up till I couldn't walk the next day. They were so swelled up. We walked so much that day. And so I said, well, if I ever get them back home, I'll never take them off again. And kept them in the cold water, and they were bloody, falling down through the bamboo. The shins were, above the knees weren't so bad, but below the knees didn't look very good. And then after 2 or 3 days, we didn't have any medicine put on them, so that they festered up a little bit. And they were sore, and then we took the boots off that night. I had on GI boots, but they were ankle, just above your shoe, just above your ankle. And once I got them back on, I never did take them off no more. And we weren't used to walking up and down the hills, up and down the mountains, till we found out we had to walk straight up sometimes, straight down sometimes, that we would have to sit down and rest often. And we went the 3rd day, and before we ever knew we were behind Japanese lines, and we had not burned some of the cartons that we had opened. And we've got our jungle pack. One is on a 45 caliber ammunition. It has about 20 shells in a pack about 6 inches long or 8 inches long, and it has a piece of red tape around it. And we just pitched it off to the side of the bushes. And then one of the Burmese people, or I couldn't tell, Kachins, the people that brought us out of the jungle, he said, Japan, Japan, Japan. And that's the first time we knew that we were behind enemy lines. That was about 3 days out. We had passed back behind the same place that we had slept the 2 or 3 nights before, which means we was walking in circles. was taking the easy way out, but we couldn't recognize which way we were going. And once we got with those people, we stayed with we walked several days, I think, and we went to the, it was out in the jungle, but it was the headquarters of the British intelligence people. And they were Burmese, and they couldn't speak English. One of them could speak English, some of them could understand English, but 9/10 of them couldn't speak anything. And they had a particular job to do, and the food that they had was dropped to them when they could get a clearing and get, they told us how close we were to the Japanese, we couldn't make a lot of racket. And they hit us 2 or 3 times, hit us in the bushes and made us stop, and we could hear the Japanese pass. And if you ever heard your own heartbeat, well, you'll know.
I can't imagine.
You can hear it beat. And it sounds like it's making a lot of racket, but evidently it wasn't making much racket. But it was beating fast, and you could hear the Japanese pass. They couldn't, if they'd had a dog with them or something like that, you know, a dog smells so better than a human being, they might have done some good. But they didn't have a dog. And good for us, they didn't have a dog. And then they communicated back and forth with the radio. They had a crank generator, and to use it, you had to crank it. And it was a slop-shod thing. It was put together, it wouldn't work half the time. We didn't know whether it was getting through. They didn't know whether it was getting through or not. So I think we stayed with them, and it was a good rest too, about 2 or 3 days. In the jungle, different parts of the jungle, we just stayed in one place. Then then we walked out, he got somebody to go with us, 2 people. And each village we'd go from, seemed like from hilltop to hilltop. I think we hit every hilltop in Burma. And these intelligence people would get somebody to go with us, and they'd carry our jackets, our heavy wool jacket, and we didn't have much, but they in our jungle pack, I can't imagine why the things they carried, but they had carried stuff for us. We wouldn't have to carry it. They would call them bears, B-E-A-R-E-R-S, bears. And they called them something else, of course. They called them in their own name. They're Kachin Hill people, and they were headhunters. And they just lived very meagerly, very, very meagerly. And they, if they would eat the rice on, they'd cook it, the Japanese wouldn't take it from them, but the Japanese would come upon them, and they had fresh rice where they had just harvested. They'd take that, but they wouldn't take the other kind because it's sour once you cook it. So they got used to eating the sour stuff. And we tried to eat the sour stuff, Hammond and myself, but we found out if we get sick, we talked it over amongst ourselves. We didn't want to eat anything that would make us sick, because if the one person got sick, the other person could never have used him as a beast of burden. Put him on his back, carry him, or whatever, because we couldn't afford to get sick. So what I'm saying is, we didn't do this on purpose. We did it because we thought it was a necessity not to eat some of the stuff, because we didn't want to get sick. Now, we lost a lot of weight, but we didn't come close to starving. To make a long story short, I think I weighed about 150 pounds when I bailed out, 155 pounds. And when I walked out, I weighed 117. And I think, I'm not sure of Hammond, and I never did find Bagby. And that piece of paper that I gave you indicates that the Japanese got a hold of him, Bagby, it was a co-pilot. And Linthicum was an engineer, but he managed to meet up with the same people we did, but they never could communicate with us. They're intelligence people, the Burmese people, that they were scattered over Burma. And I look back on that thing as it being a good thing. Those people were not out there just for us. They was out there for the army too, to let the army know where the Japanese were. And the Japanese were, that were there were just about in, they were in better shape than we were, they were more used to it, but they were in about as bad a shape as we were insofar as getting along, because they hadn't had any more food than, they was usually eating rice. So it helped them out quite a bit. And so we went on and on and on, and we trudged on. We didn't ever enter our mind, no, I think Hamlin never entered in his mind that he was not going to get out, that eventually he would get out. And our destination was Fort Hertz. Now, that's an American name, and I don't think, I'm not certain, that's where the airfield was, that the only airplane could come and get us was at Fort Hertz. And that's 100 and, as we found out, it's about 153, 155 miles from where we landed at Mission Hill. But we landed 18 miles from Mission Hill, so this report says. And then we didn't know it, but we walked almost to the railroad, half a mile to where the railroad ends. We walked, and we could hear the Japanese, but we didn't know they were Japanese. I'm backtracking a little bit. From ignorance sake, then we found out they were Japanese. Then we turned around and started walking north again. And all total, we walked about 153 miles, 154 miles through the mountains. And we met several other pieces of crews. I don't know. I could have asked them, I guess, but we didn't ask them. One crew member was from one airplane, and another was from another airplane. I didn't know what happened to the others, whether they got killed in the crash or what happened to them. But anyway, after 20 days, 21 days, we went to Fort Hertz, and we stayed there about 2 or 3 days, 2 days, I guess, recuperating, so to speak. Then the airplane, well, the airplane couldn't come get us. That's the only place in Burma that they could land to pick you up. And that was way north in Burma. If you picture Burma as a long, narrow thing, north to south, and China is a long place, north to south, and we was flying across Burma to get to India. Well, anyway, we got to Fort Hertz after that many days. I think it's 21 or 22 days, 23 days. And we did not think about ourselves as being, beat up or wasn't going to make it or anything. I don't think that ever entered our mind. The mind, what you think about is that you are going to make it, you are going to get out eventually, just keep at it. And I don't know whether we thought that or not, but we did do that. We went, flew in, walked into Fort Hertz, and we were under the care of Kachin Hill people most of the time. And the Kachin Hill people, they were funny people, but they had long huts, and when we'd go into a village, it would be 4 or 5 houses in a hilltop, and we'd sleep, and they'd put us in the back part of the building. The Americans, the 2 of us, there's only Americans there, they'd put us in the back part of this building and hide us. So if the Japanese come around, they wouldn't find us. They could keep hiding us in the building. And I think that we stayed in, we slept outside most of the time, but I think 2 or 3 times we slept in the Kachin Hill people village. Now the Kachin Hill people village, they were called headhunters, but they didn't headhunt, but they buried their people above the ground about 8 or 10 feet on stilts. Have a 4-legged stilt, and it'd be a bed built out of a bamboo, and the dead person they'd put him up there, him or her, on top of this thing, and cover him up with something, with a mat or something. He didn't smell too bad. We didn't come across. We smelled some stuff that didn't go along with us. It didn't smell too good. But anyway, those dead people didn't smell too bad. But it was very good, and we would have never gotten out of the jungle without the people helping us get out. Now, I have, and I'm going to give to you, to give to these people, lots of airplanes here by tail number, the last four numbers, and it gives the crew, but it will not say, the paper does not say whether these crews got out in one piece or they died or whatever happened to them. Now, I have condensed this dissertation quite a bit because I don't think that the whole story would go too good for the general public. But if you have any questions, I'd certainly be obliged to try to answer them.
When did you actually get out of get back to the main base?
Well, we flew from Fort Hertz in
Yeah.
North Burma to Chabwa,
Yes.
about 150 miles. I'm guessing at that.
And what month did you get, was that in,
February we bailed out on February the 16th and walked in to Chabwa, and the men were there happy to see us on March the 4th.
and Lieutenant Bagby had been captured by
He had been captured by the Japanese, but we didn't know that.
and he got released in May of 1940.
1945, so this paper says.
Yes.
And I never saw him. And I tried to contact his mother and his father, and I couldn't call him. And I tried to contact Lindstrom. He's the engineer.
Yes.
I tried to contact him, and I couldn't do it. And since then, I've tried to get a hold of Hammond, the guy that walked out with me,
Yes.
just to see how he's doing, and chew the rag just a little bit. And I haven't been able to get a hold of him either.
Did you go back to flying, or did you come back to the United States after you?
No,
escaped?
I come back to the United States, but I picked up a war-weary, they call it a war-weary C-46. It's to be overhauled. Airplane is going to the depot to be,
That's okay. We'll keep it going on this one.
the war-weary airplane is going to be overhauled and redone and sent back or sent someplace. So we flew a C-46. I got a crew together. Went to Agra, India, from Chabwa, India to Agra, India, about 150 miles, say, southeast, back into friendly territory, away from the Japanese, and picked the airplane up. Excuse me, and it had been flying hump like all the rest of them, and it was coming back with 2 new engines and for clean up and wash it and get the coal dust out of it and so forth.
Where were you when you heard about the atomic bomb being dropped?
Well, I knew from publicity of the military that the atomic bomb was going to be dropped, and it was ahead of time before it was dropped. I didn't know what day.
What were your feelings about it when you heard about it? Were you scared, glad?
Well, I really didn't know that it was as powerful as it was, and I still was astonished when I saw the effects. The buildings just flew apart. I had seen these huts out in the desert disintegrate when the atomic blast would, disintegrate them, just consume them. And I thought, I really didn't give it much thought. So far as a humanitarian thing goes. Now I was at, this is after World War II was over with, doing my military career, when I was in Japan, and I think it was 56 or 57. I went to Enewetak, and I am one of the few living persons, I believe, that ever saw an H weapon explode. H-bomb explode on a raft in the lagoon at Enewetak. Now they told us what was going to happen, that it would be a tidal wave coming to water,
Sure.
And so telling you something, you listen and you believe. But seeing it with your eyes, like when the water first changed, after the H bomb went off, the hydrogen bomb went off in that little lagoon, we could see the discoloration of the water out in the lagoon. The lagoon is a round thing like this, generally speaking, and you could see different colors of gray, and all of a sudden the water rose about 20 feet. Right where we were sitting in a baseball stand on the Enewetak, and we had on black raincoats and dark glasses, and we'd already seen the bomb go off, and it was somewhere around 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning that they told us it was going to go off, and didn't mean anything to us except to listen, listen to the broadcast and listen for them to tell us. And then, when it sucked the water back in, there was landing ship tanks that the Army had used during World War II, early in World War II. They were great big heavy things, 60, 70 feet long. Just rolled them over and over and over and over and over. Just rolled them over. The waves took them out. And it happened 3 times. The second time was a little less than the first, and then the third time was a little less than the other one.
How far away from the detonation were you all?
We was 23 miles from the detonation of the H-bomb. And it was put off on a barge. It wasn't dropped from
Right.
a plane. It was put off on a barge. And there hadn't been one since.
Mr. Barton, we have a few more minutes left on the video. Would you like to tell us anything about what your appreciation is of this country, of having defended the homeland for people like me to be able to go to grammar school and kindergarten when you were over there fighting for us? I'm personally very much appreciative of what you did. You probably, like most of the people your age, you just thought you were doing a job. And
Well, when you have to sum it up, with the time being, thinking about now and then, now and then, and now is when I was growing up and experiencing the hectic days of the military growing and so forth. I didn't think about them doing anything wrong. I thought, well, they will do something right and I'll help them do it. And 20 years, it's a long time, but World War II was over with before my 20 years was up. And I was in, while we were going through North Africa and through India and China and Japan, and I ended up taking my family to Japan. I asked my wife, of course, if she wanted to go, and she said yes. And I had 3 children, and I said they said less. Yes, they wanted to go, and they had a good time. But the effects of Hiroshima and the effects of Japan and the atomic bomb on Japan was never discussed, not by them or by us, or brought up by anything. It ended a conflict of which millions and millions of Americans would have been killed. Now you can say, who should be killed? The Japanese? Or the Americans? Well, nobody should be. But if when you're in a war, fighting a war, you try to kill the enemy.
that's right.
You try to get rid of the enemy. And the atomic bomb got rid of so many, just devastation. I can't even imagine it. Unless you're there, you can't imagine it. So being a patriot or something, I am a patriot of the United States. And I love the United States. And I'm so old now that I can't do anything about it. But I will always be a person that will back the United States. I do not agree with the president and everything he says, but I will always back him because the ultimate end is to try to do what's right.
I might add that Mr. Barton started this morning by being a volunteer at Kennesaw Hospital, where he does volunteer work. So not only did he help us back during the time of World War II, but he's still volunteering to help service mankind today by being a volunteer at one of our local hospitals, which we're appreciative of you doing that service also, sir.
Thank you.
thank you so very much. It's been a real treat to have you here today, and again, for my generation and future generations, we express our sincere appreciation.